To the galaxy, the Valari are gods of war. 9 feet of chitin and dense muscle, evolved on a planet with gravity so heavy it would crush a human's lungs in seconds. They are unbreakable, unstoppable. The apex predators of the Orion arm. And then, there's Elias. Elias is a human. He's soft. He bruises if he bumps into a table. He sleeps 10 hours a day. His alien wife, High Justicar Xylona, loves him, but she treats him like a porcelain doll. To her, he is the most fragile thing in the universe. A pet that needs constant protection from a galaxy too sharp for his soft skin. She was wrong. Because when the sirens screamed and the shields failed, Xylona learned the terrifying difference between strength and survival. She learned why the universe is quiet around the Sol system. And she learned that you don't need armor when you are the weapon. Before we unleash the beast, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We bring you the best sci-fi stories from across the galaxy every single week. Join the fleet, turn on notifications, and let's see if Elias survives the night. Buckle up. This is the Glass Husband. The corridors of the Void Bastion were built for giants. Every doorway was 12 feet high. Every handle was thick enough to require 2 human hands to grip. For Elias, living here wasn't just a marriage, it was an exercise in navigation. He was a guest in a world that wasn't designed for him. Elias sat on the edge of the massive berth, a bed that felt more like a landing pad than a place to sleep, and watched his wife, High Justicar Xylona, prepare for her morning patrol. Xylona was magnificent. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, her skin was a deep, iridescent obsidian, naturally armored and cool to the touch. When she moved, you could feel the vibration in the floorboards. She was a Valari, a species born on a super-Earth with gravity 3 times that of standard Terran norms. She picked up her helmet, a piece of plasteel alloy that weighed as much as a motorbike, and set it gently on the rack. Then she turned her 4 glowing amber eyes toward Elias. Her gaze softened. It was the look you'd give a puppy that had just learned to sit. "Stay within the inner sanctum today, little one," Xylona rumbled. Her voice was like tectonic plates shifting, deep, resonant, vibrating right through Elias's chest. The navigational sensors are picking up ion storms. The turbulence could be hazardous for your bone density. Elias smiled, sipping his coffee from a thermos he'd had to specially import because the ship's mugs were the size of buckets. "XY, I think I can handle a little bumping around. I survived rush hour traffic in Los Angeles for 10 years. That's basically combat training." Xylona didn't laugh. She reached out a massive hand, her fingers thick as sausages and hard as stone, and gently, so gently, stroked his cheek. He leaned into it despite the rough texture. "You are so soft," she whispered, a hint of genuine worry in her voice. "Your skin tears at the slightest friction. Your bones are porous. Even now I can hear your heart. It beats so fast like a frightened bird. Thump, 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 thump. It terrifies me, Elias. I feel that if I hold you too tight, you will simply cease." Elias sighed. This was the dynamic. To the Valari, humans were an oddity, a Class 1 Deathworlder species, sure, but evolved for endurance and heat dissipation, not raw crushing power. In a wrestling match, Xylona could rip Elias in half without breaking a sweat. In a gravity chamber, she could stand comfortably while he would turn into a puddle. "I'm tougher than I look, XY, Elias said, putting his hand over hers. His hand looked like a child's toy against her palm. "Humans are resilient. We bounce." "You do not bounce," she corrected him, deadly serious. "You splatter. Please. For my peace of mind. Activate the gravity dampeners and stay in the quarters. I will return in 4 cycles." She leaned down, kissing him carefully on the forehead, treating him like he was made of spun sugar and dreams. Then she turned and marched out the door. The heavy blast doors hissed shut, locking with a magnetic thud that shook the room. Elias was alone. Again. He stood up and stretched, his joints popping. He walked over to the viewport. Outside, the stars were streaking by. He loved Xylona. He really did. But the fragile pet routine was getting old. He checked his smartwatch. His heart rate was a resting 55 beats per minute. "Frightened bird, huh?" he muttered to himself. "Just efficient, babe. Just efficient." He walked over to his personal gym, a small corner of the room he'd set up with human-grade equipment. To Xylona, his 200-pound weights were paperweights. She used them to hold down maps. But for Elias, this was his sanctuary. He needed to keep his edge. You don't grow up in the megacities of Earth, surviving the resource wars of 2140, without learning that peace is just the reloading time between crises. He lay on the bench press, gripping the cold iron. 1, 2, 3. He focused on the burn. The Valari didn't understand the burn. Their muscles were hydraulic, they worked until they failed. They didn't tear and rebuild like humans. They didn't adapt. They were static. Strong, yes, but static. Elias racked the weight and sat up, wiping sweat from his brow. Computer, he called out. Scan Sector 7. Passive sensors only. The ship's AI chirped. Scanning. Anomaly detected. Silhouette does not match Federation profiles. Elias narrowed his eyes. Xylona had mentioned ion storms. Ion storms didn't have silhouettes. He walked to his locker, the one Xylona thought contained his human snacks and soft clothing. He punched in a biometric code. The false back of the locker slid open. Inside wasn't snacks. It was a kinetic pulse rifle, a combat knife made of high-carbon steel, and a vest of woven arachnid silk armor. Just in case, he whispered. Always just in case. The attack didn't start with a bang. It started with a shudder. The Void Bastion, a ship the size of a city, lurched sideways. Gravity fluctuated wildly, 0.5 gs, then 3 gs, then back to standard. In the inner sanctum, Elias was thrown against the wall. He grunted, tucking his chin to protect his neck, instinctively rolling with the impact. A Valari would have stood rigid and potentially snapped a joint. Elias flowed like water. Alert! The AI voice droned, devoid of panic. Hull breach in Sector 4. Hull breach in Sector 5. Intruder alert. The Carewell have boarded. Elias's blood ran cold. The Carewell. The Carewell were a swarm species. Insectoid, cybernetically enhanced, and utterly without mercy. They didn't want cargo, they wanted biomass. They wanted food. And the Void Bastion, full of nutrient-dense Valari, was an all-you-can-eat buffet. Show me the feeds, Elias barked, pulling on his boots. A holographic screen flickered to life. The security footage was a nightmare. Massive Valari guards, clad in heavy plate armor, were firing huge plasma cannons down the corridors. The weapons were devastating, but they were slow. The Carewell were not slow. They skittered on the walls and ceilings, moving in a blur of multi-limbed chaos. They were small compared to the Valari, maybe only 6 feet long, but they swarmed. They dodged the slow plasma bolts and leaped onto the guards, using plasma cutters to slice through the joints of the Valari armor. It was a massacre. The Valari were fighting a war of strength. The Carewell were fighting a war of speed. Xylona, Elias breathed. Computer, locate High Justicar Xylona. High Justicar Xylona is in the command atrium, the AI replied. She is currently engaged in close-quarters combat. Elias grabbed his gear. He strapped the armor vest over his chest. It looked ridiculously thin compared to Valari plate, but it allowed him to move. He checked the charge on his kinetic rifle. Full. He ran to the door. Lock. Override, he commanded. Negative, the AI said. Lockdown initiated by High Justicar Xylona. Authorization code. Protect the pet. You are sealed in for your own safety, Elias. Elias slammed his fist against the metal. Open the damn door. She's going to die out there. The Justicar's orders are absolute. The threats outside are classified as lethal to level 1 organisms. You have 0 chance of survival. Please assume the fetal position and await rescue. Elias stared at the door. He could hear the screams now. The deep, booming roars of dying Valari. He looked back at the screen. He saw Xylona. She was a mountain of rage, swinging a gravity hammer that must have weighed a ton. She crushed a Carewell drone into green paste, but 3 more jumped on her back. They were stabbing at her neck seals. She was slowing down. Her movements were becoming sluggish, heat buildup. Valari couldn't sweat. In prolonged combat they cooked inside their own armor. She's overheating, Elias realized. She's going to heat stroke out in 5 minutes. He looked at the ventilation shaft near the ceiling. It was too small for a Valari. Carewell might fit, but it would be tight. But a human? A flexible, squishy, fragile human? Elias dragged a table over. He didn't have the strength to rip the grate off, so he used the butt of his rifle as a lever. Snap. The bolts gave way. He shimmied into the dark, dusty vent. It smelled of ozone and recycled air. Computer, he whispered into his comms. You said I have 0 chance of survival? Calculated probability is 0.003%, the AI replied. Elias crawled forward, his elbows scraping against the metal. A grim smile touched his lips. Never tell a human the odds, you bucket of bolts. We take that as a challenge. He moved fast. The vents bypassed the blast doors. Below him, through the slats, he saw the carnage. The Carewell were overwhelming the ship. They were fast, efficient killers. But Elias noticed something. They relied on thermal vision. They were targeting the hottest things in the room, the overheating Valari. Elias wasn't hot. Compared to the ambient temperature and the burning plasma, he was a ghost. A cold, soft, invisible ghost. He reached the grate above the command atrium. He looked down. It was bad. Zylona was on one knee. Her helmet was gone, knocked off by a plasma grenade. Blue blood oozed from a cut above her eye. She was surrounded by 20 Carewell drones and their alpha, a towering monstrosity with sides for arms. "Surrender your biomass," the alpha hissed, its voice a synthesized scratch. "Your heat is fading, Titan. You are done." Zylona spat blue blood. "A Valari does not surrender. We die standing." "Then die," the alpha raised its scythe. Elias kicked the grate out. "There is a chemical inside the human body that most species in the galaxy do not possess. It is a relic of our evolution on a world where we were not the strongest, not the fastest, and definitely not the biggest. We were the prey that learned to hunt the predators. It's called adrenaline. For a Valari, combat is a calculation of mass and force. For a human, combat is a chemical cascade." In a fraction of a second, Elias's adrenal glands dumped a cocktail of hormones into his bloodstream. Pain receptors? Time perception? Slowed. Muscle recruitment? Maximized. Hysterical strength? Unlocked. Elias dropped from the ceiling. He didn't land like a superhero. He landed like a predator. He tucked and rolled, absorbing the 20-foot drop that would have shattered a Valari's rigid ankles. He came up directly behind the Carewell Alpha. The Alpha didn't even know he was there. Its sensors were tuned to the massive heat signatures of the Valari. Elias was just background noise. "Hey, ugly!" Elias screamed. The Alpha turned, confused. Elias didn't use a plasma cannon. He used a shotgun, a chaotic, primitive weapon that fired a spread of kinetic pellets. He jammed the barrel into the Alpha's open mouthparts and pulled the trigger. Boom. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. The Alpha's head didn't just explode, it vanished in a mist of green ichor and circuitry. The headless body stood for a second, twitching before collapsing. Silence. Absolute silence descended on the atrium. The 19 other Carewell drones froze. They looked at the dead Alpha. They looked at the massive, bleeding Zylona. And then they looked at the tiny, soft, unarmored creature standing on top of the corpse, racking the slide of his shotgun. Zylona blinked, her vision blurry from blood loss. "Elias?" she whispered, horror filling her voice. "Elias, get back. You are fragile." Elias turned to look at her. His eyes were different. The soft, loving husband who liked pickles and naps was gone. His pupils were dilated so wide his eyes looked black. His teeth were bared in a rictus snarl, a primate bearing fangs. He was vibrating, not with fear but with the raw, chaotic energy of a death worlder unleashed. "Sorry, honey," Elias said, his voice raspy and strange. "I'm not staying in the box today." The Carewell shrieked, a collective hive mind signal to attack the new threat. They swarmed. "Run!" Zylona screamed, trying to stand but failing as her leg servo sparked and died. Elias didn't run. He moved. The Valari fight like tanks, stand your ground, absorb the hit, return fire. Elias fought like a hurricane made of glass and hate. A Carewell drone lunged at him, scythes raised. Elias didn't block, he couldn't block. A block would break his arm. Instead, he dropped to his knees, sliding across the polished floor. He slipped under the scythe, slashing upward with his combat knife. He targeted the soft joints, the armpits, the groin, the neck seams. He severed the drone's hydraulic line. The drone collapsed, flailing. Elias popped up, sprinting toward a pillar. He wasn't faster than them in a straight line, but he had agility they couldn't process. He bounced off the wall, using his human parkour skills that Zylona found so amusing in the gym. He landed on a drone's back. "Get off him." Zylona roared, trying to drag herself toward the fight. "Stay down, XY. Elias yelled. He jammed a grenade into the drone's exhaust port and backflipped away. Crump. Green slime coated the walls. The Carewell were confused. Their algorithms couldn't predict him. He was erratic. He threw debris. He used flashbangs that blinded their thermal sensors. He was fighting dirty. He was fighting human. But he wasn't invincible. A Carewell claw grazed his side. It sliced through the silk armor and opened a gash in his ribs. Zylona gasped. "Elias, you bleed." Elias didn't even flinch. He looked at the wound, laughed, a manic, terrifying sound, and kept shooting. Just a scratch, he roared. This terrified the Carewell more than the weapons. In their experience, soft organisms went into shock when injured. They stopped fighting. But this pink, soft thing was fighting harder after being hurt. It defied biology. Elias ran out of shotgun shells. He threw the empty gun at a drone's face, staggering it, then drew his pistol. Bang, bang, bang. Headshot, headshot, kneecap. He was a whirlwind. But he was tiring. The adrenaline was burning through his glucose reserves. He was panting heavily, sweat pouring off him, a cooling mechanism the Carewell and Valari lacked. He was cooling down while they were overheating. There were 3 drones left. They circled him, wary now. They recognized a predator. Elias stood between them and his fallen wife. He held his knife in a reverse grip. He looked small, pitiful, almost against the 7-foot metallic insects. But his shadow seemed to stretch across the room. "Come on," Elias whispered. "Come and get it." The drones charged simultaneously. Elias didn't dodge this time. He stepped into the attack. He took a scythe through the shoulder, a sickening crunch of bone, pinning him in place. Zylona screamed, a sound of pure heartbreak. But Elias didn't fall. He smiled. He had let them pin him. With his good arm, he slammed a high-explosive breaching charge onto the chest of the drone, stabbing him. "Hugs and kisses," he grunted. He kicked away, tearing his own shoulder loose from the scythe. He rolled behind the heavy command console just as the charge detonated. The explosion chain reacted with the drone's plasma core. The blast vaporized the remaining attackers in a wave of blue fire. Elias lay behind the console, chest heaving, blood pooling around him. The room fell silent again. The battle was over. The silence was heavier than the gravity. Zylona pulled herself over to where Elias lay. She was terrified of what she would find. She expected a corpse. She expected a broken toy. Elias was pale. His skin was gray, clammy with shock. The adrenaline was fading and the pain was arriving like a freight train. He looked up at her, his eyes losing that terrifying black depth and returning to their warm hazel. He coughed, blood speckling his lips. "Did I get him?" Zylona, the High Justicar, the Iron Maiden of the Valari, began to weep. Giant, heavy tears splashed onto the metal floor. She reached out a hand but hesitated. She was afraid to touch him. "You foolish, stupid, tiny creature," she sobbed. "You are broken. Your shoulder, your ribs. Why? Why did you not stay in the safety box?" Elias let out a shaky breath. "Because you were in trouble, XY. And nobody hurts my wife." He tried to sit up but groaned and fell back. "Okay. Well, that hurts now. I think I need a doctor. And maybe a sandwich. I'm really hungry." Zylona scooped him up. She ignored the pain in her own severed leg servo. She held him against her chest plate, cradling him like he was the most precious, dangerous artifact in the galaxy. "Medic," she roared, her voice shaking the bulkheads. "Get a medical team to the atrium. Now. Priority Alpha." She looked down at him. He was passing out, his body finally shutting down to repair the damage. "You are not glass," she whispered to his unconscious form. "I thought you were glass. But you are a diamond. You scratch everything you touch." The ship's security team, reinforcements from the lower decks, finally burst in. They stopped dead. They saw the carnage. The dead Alpha. The vaporized drones. The green slime coating the walls. And they saw their High Justicar, battered and broken, holding the small, soft human husband. "Ma'am," the captain of the guard stammered, looking at the dead Carewell. Did the backup generator overload? What killed the boarding party?" Zylona looked at the captain. Her eyes burned with a new, fierce pride. "No generator," she growled. "My husband killed them." The captain looked at the small, limp human. "Him? But he is a Terran. They are soft." Zylona bared her teeth. "Yes, they are soft. And if you ever call him weak again, I will let him loose on you." Recovery for a human is a strange thing to alien eyes. A Valari injury takes months to fuse. Elias was up and walking in 3 weeks. His bones knitted together with calcium supplements. His skin scar tissue formed pink and tough. The dynamic on the Void Bastion had changed. Elias walked down the corridor and the giant Valari guards didn't look at him with pity anymore. They stepped aside. They saluted. They whispered rumors about the Berserker of Soul. Zylona no longer asked him to stay in the room during turbulence. She realized that while she was built to withstand the storm, Elias was built to be the storm. "The council is reviewing the footage," Xylona said, watching him eat the apple. They want to classify humans as a biological hazard. They say your adrenaline is an illegal combat drug produced internally. Elias chuckled. Let him classify it. Might keep the pirates away. Xylona leaned down. This time when she touched his face, she didn't treat him like porcelain. She treated him like an equal. A partner. I promise, she said softly, I will never call you fragile again. Elias grinned, leaning his head against her massive shoulder. Oh, you can call me fragile, honey. Just don't forget, shrapnel is fragile too. Until it hits you at 3,000 feet per second. And so, the galaxy learned a valuable lesson that day. You can judge a species by their armor or their size or their gravity. But you should never, ever judge them by their patience. Because the most dangerous things in the universe aren't the ones that roar. They're the ones that wait until you open the cage. And that is the story of Elias and Xylona. What do you think? Would you trust a human to have your back in a spaceship brawl, or are we just too squishy for the big leagues? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It helps the channel survive the algorithm swarms. And if you haven't already, subscribe and check out this playlist right here for more stories about humanity surprising the galaxy. Until next time, keep your shields up and remember, Earthlings bite.